Welcome back to the deep dive.
Yeah.
I am so ready for this one because today we are tackling a subject that I think occupies about 80% of our collective brain space.
Oh, at least.
It causes stress, it causes excitement, it ruins marriages, and it builds empires. We are talking about money.
Mm-hmm.
But, and I want to be very clear right up front, we are not talking about which hot stock to buy this week. We aren't decoding balance sheets or arguing about interest rates.
No, absolutely not. We're going a layer deeper than that. We are looking at the engine behind the math. We are talking about the psychology of money.
Right.
Because, as we're going to find out, how you behave with money is infinitely more important than how smart you are about money.
And to guide us through this, we're doing a comprehensive deep dive into the work of Morgan Housel and his phenomenal book, The Psychology of Money. And to kick this off, I want to tell a story. Well, it's really two stories. A tale of two investors.
The perfect setup.
And I think this comparison perfectly frames why finance is such a weird, unique field.
It's the ultimate contradiction to start with.
So, in one corner, let's meet Ronald Reed. Now, Ronald was not a Wall Street guy. He was a rural Vermont janitor and a gas station attendant. A very low-key, unassuming guy.
Totally.
I read that he was the first person in his family to even graduate high school. He chopped firewood for fun. He drove a second-hand Toyota Yaris.
He was the kind of guy you wouldn't look at twice. He lived in this tiny house he bought for something like, what, $12,000?
Something like that, yeah.
He wore a flannel jacket until it was literally falling apart. I mean, the stories say he used safety pins to hold his coat together.
Exactly. Totally invisible. But when Ronald Reed died in 2014, at the ripe old age of 92, he made international headlines. The world was stunned.
Because this humble janitor who swept floors for a living had a net worth of over $8 million.
$8 million. And naturally, when the news broke, everyone was baffled. The immediate assumption was, okay, he must have won the lottery, or maybe he inherited a gold mine from a distant uncle.
Right, there has to be a trick. There has to be some secret windfall.
Yeah. But the answer was no. It was much simpler and honestly much more boring. He just saved. He lived way below his means, and he put what little he could into blue-chip stocks.
And then, and this is the hardest part for most people, he did absolutely nothing. He just waited.
For decades.
For decades! He let the compounding do the heavy lifting until that little snowball, turned into an avalanche.
So keep Ronald in your mind. The janitor with $8 million. Now let's look at the other corner. We have a man named Richard Fuscone. And Richard was basically everything Ronald was not.
The polar opposite. Richard Fuscone was Harvard-educated, he had an MBA, he was a high-ranking executive at Merrill Lynch.
A total rock star in the finance world.
Yeah, he was on Crane's 40 under 40 list of successful business people.
He was the definition of winning. He was so successful that he retired in his 40s to become a philanthropist. And to celebrate, he decided to expand his home in Greenwich, Connecticut.
And we aren't talking about adding a sunroom here.
No. This place was an 18,000 square foot compound.
Just to put that in perspective, that is massive. That's bigger than most hotels.
It had 11 bathrooms.
11.
2 elevators. 2 swimming pools.
Yeah.
7 garages.
Yeah.
And the maintenance cost alone was something like $90,000 a month.
Insane. But hey, he was a master of the universe, right?
Until he wasn't.
Yeah.
Because Richard borrowed heavily to build this lifestyle. He was leveraged to the hilt. And then the 2008 financial crisis hit.
And unlike Ronald Reed, who had a buffer, Richard's finances turned to dust almost overnight.
It was a total collapse.
It really was. He went bankrupt. The liquidity dried up. That massive Greenwich home foreclosed on. It was eventually sold in an auction for like 75% less than what he thought it was worth.
He left the court with nothing.
Nothing.
So think about this. Barely months apart, you have a rural janitor leaving millions to his local library and hospital, and you have a Harvard-educated executive going bust. And this is the hook for our entire deep dive today, because this simply cannot happen in other fields.
That is the critical point. Think about it. In what other industry can a janitor outperform a top-tier professional? It's impossible. A janitor cannot perform a heart transplant better than a Harvard-trained surgeon.
Right. You wouldn't want Ronald Reed doing your bypass surgery. No offense to Ronald.
And a janitor cannot design a skyscraper better than a trained architect. In those fields, technical skill, rigorous training, and raw intelligence are the absolute barriers to entry.
But in finance?
In finance, the janitor can beat the executive.
And he did.
Because finance isn't physics. It isn't a hard science where you plug data into a formula and get a guaranteed result. It is a soft skill. It's about how you behave. It's about psychology.
Right.
And as we see with Richard Fuscone, you can have all the intelligence and education in the world. You can be a literal genius. But if you don't have the behavioral control, if you lacked patience or humility, you can lose it all.
So that is our mission statement for today. We are going to debunk the idea that money is just math. If you're listening to this and you feel intimidated by spreadsheets or complex terms, take a breath.
Yeah.
Because we're going to look at the history, the emotions, and the psychology that actually drive our financial lives.
And hopefully by the end of this, we can help you understand why smart people do crazy things with money and how you can define wealth in a way that actually gives you control over your life rather than just chasing a number on a screen.
Let's unpack the first big idea from the source material, which I found surprisingly compassionate. It's the idea that no one is crazy.
I love this starting point. We often look at how other people spend or invest and we judge them. We think, why are they buying that? Or why are they panicking? We think they're illogical.
Or just dumb.
Or just dumb, right. But the premise here is that people make financial decisions based on their own unique experiences, which make perfect sense to them at that moment.
It's all about context. The world is huge, but our little slice of it is tiny.
Exactly. House writes that your personal experiences with money make up maybe 0.00001% of what's happened in the world. But they explain 80% of how you think the world works. We are anchored to our own history. We're prisoners of the specific time and place we were born.
The notes mention JFK here, which I hadn't connected to finance before, but it makes so much sense.
It's a perfect example of the anchor of history. So JFK runs for president in 1960. Now remember the context. The biggest issue for voters was the economy and the lingering, painful memory of the Great Depression.
Right. That trauma was still very fresh for a lot of people. People had lost everything. They were scarred.
But JFK, he came from one of the wealthiest families in the world. And fascinatingly, the Kennedy family fortune actually grew during the Great Depression. While everyone else was selling assets for pennies, his father was buying them up.
So JFK had a totally different reality. He just lived in a different universe.
He did. In an interview during the campaign, JFK actually admitted that he had no firsthand knowledge of the Depression. He said he only learned about it in textbooks at Harvard.
So he knew the data.
He understood the data, he knew the unemployment numbers, he knew the GDP drop, but he couldn't understand the scar. He didn't have the emotional trauma.
And that's what drives you.
Exactly. And in finance, that emotional scar tissue drives behavior much more than spreadsheets do. You can show someone a chart that says stocks go up over the long run, but if they watch their parents lose their house in a recession, that chart doesn't matter. The scar matters.
Let's look at the stock market data on this, because the birth year comparison is wild.
This is one of my favorite stats. If you were born in 1970, think about your formative years. In your teens and 20s, when you're just starting to earn money and pay attention to the economy, the S&P 500 increased nearly tenfold.
So you're seeing green arrows everywhere. You think, wow, the stock market is a wealth-generating machine. This is easy. You get conditioned.
You're an optimist by default because that's your lived reality. But let's say you were born in 1950. During your teens and 20s, the market went literally nowhere. It was stagnant. Adjusted for inflation, it was flat for basically 2 decades.
That's so demoralizing. You feel like it was a rigged game.
It is. So if you put those two people in a room today, the person born in 1950 and the person born in 1970, they're going to fundamentally disagree on the risk and reward of stocks.
And they'll both think the other one is crazy.
Exactly. The 1970 guy thinks stocks are a no-brainer. The 1950 guy thinks the market is a scam that goes nowhere. And the key is, neither of them is crazy.
They're just looking at the world through their own very specific lens.
Precisely. And the same applies to inflation. If you grew up in the 1960s, you saw prices triple in your youth. You have a deep-seated fear of inflation. If you grew up in the 1990s, inflation was non-existent. You probably don't even worry about it.
It really highlights that we aren't these rational calculators. We're just people trying to make sense of things based on what we've seen.
And we also have to remember how new all of this modern finance stuff is. We act like we should be pros at this, like managing a 401k is instinctual. But it's not.
That was a surprising realization for me, just how young the concept of retirement is.
We are absolutely winging it. We think of retirement as this natural human phase, right? You work, you stop, you play golf.
The third act of life.
But before World War II, most men worked until they died. The labor participation rate for men over 65 was over 50%. You worked on the farm or in the factory until you physically couldn't.
The idea of a 30-year retirement funded by investments is a modern invention.
Completely. And the tools we use. I mean, the 401k was not created until 1978.
1978, that's
Yeah.
not that long ago.
No. And it was almost an accident of the tax code. It wasn't designed to be the primary savings vehicle for a nation, the Roth IRA. That didn't exist until 1998.
A Roth IRA is younger than some of the interns working at this studio.
Right. And index funds are less than 50 years old. So when we feel like we're bad at this or we feel stressed about asset allocation, we have to cut ourselves some slack.
Yeah.
We don't have centuries of evolutionary adaptation for day trading or managing a diversified portfolio. We are infants in this game. We are all just figuring it out as we go.
That is a relief, honestly. Now, speaking of things we can't control, let's move to one of the most fascinating sections of the deep dive, the siblings of luck and risk.
This is a crucial concept to grasp. We often treat luck and risk as these separate, unrelated things. Luck is what happens to us when something good falls into our lap, and risk is something we try to manage or avoid.
Right.
But Housel argues they are actually the same force.
They're two sides of the same coin.
Exactly. They are both the reality that outcomes in life are guided by forces other than our own effort. Sometimes that force pushes you up, which we call luck, and sometimes it pushes you down, which we call risk. But you can't acknowledge one without the other.
And the example used here is Bill Gates. Now, obviously, Bill Gates is a genius. He's a hard worker. He's a ruthless businessman. No one's denying that.
Of course not.
But the origin story of Microsoft has a massive, undeniable element of luck.
A 1 in a million element, literally. Let's look at the math. Bill Gates attended Lakeside School in Seattle. Now, in 1968, this was a very specific time and place.
Computers were not a household item. They were the size of a room. And they were incredibly rare.
Right. But Lakeside School had a teletype machine, a teletype Model 30 connected to a mainframe. This allowed for real-time programming. This was something that even most universities didn't have access to.
And how did a high school get this? That's the crazy part.
A math teacher, Bill Dougal, petitioned the Mothers Club to use proceeds from a school rummage sale, about $3,000, to lease this computer time.
So if the Mothers Club decides to spend that money on new football uniforms or a cafeteria renovation,
then there is no Microsoft. Gates himself says it. If there had been no Lakeside, there would have been no Microsoft. He got access to a computer years before 99.9% of the world.
let's break down the stats because they are staggering.
They are. In 1968, there were roughly 303 million high school-age kids in the world. About 18 million lived in the U.S. About 270,000 lived in Washington state. And only about 300 attended Lakeside.
So he starts with a 1 in a million head start simply by sitting in that classroom.
That is luck. Pure and simple. But here is where the story gets heavy. Because we have to talk about the other side of the equation. We have to talk about Kent Evans.
This part of the story really stuck with me. I feel like everyone knows Bill Gates, but nobody knows Kent Evans.
Kent Evans was Bill Gates' best friend at Lakeside. And by Gates' own account, Kent was the best student in the class. He was just as smart as Bill. He was just as obsessed with computers.
They were a duo. They were partners.
They were. Kent had the same business ambition. He actually carried a briefcase to high school, like a little lawyer. They planned to conquer the world together. They were going to go to college, start a company. Kent Evans would have been a founding partner of Microsoft.
But that didn't happen.
No. Before graduation, Kent Evans went on a mountaineering trip with the school. And tragically, he died in an accident on the mountain.
And if you look at the stats on that,
The odds of a high school student dying in a mountaineering accident are roughly 1 in a million.
1 in a million.
So, look at the symmetry. Bill Gates experienced 1 in a million luck by getting into Lakeside. Kent Evans experienced 1 in a million risk by dying on that mountain. It is the same magnitude, the same force, just opposite directions.
That is heartbreaking. But it really forces you to rethink how we view success and failure. You can do everything right and one bad break.
And it's over. It teaches us humility. We love to build these simple narratives. When someone becomes a billionaire, we call them a visionary. We say they had grit, but we often ignore the luck. And when someone fails, we call them lazy or reckless, ignoring the risk.
The notes mention Cornelius Vanderbilt here, too. He was a classic risk taker.
Another perfect example. Vanderbilt was a tycoon. He built the railroads, but he was also a huge risk taker. He famously ignored the law. He said, the law? What do I care about the law? Ain't I got the power?
Which sounds cool in a history book, like something out of a movie.
It does, because it worked. But in a slightly different timeline, where luck didn't break his way, that quote is used by a prosecutor to put him in jail for life. He's not a visionary, he's just a criminal. It is very difficult to distinguish between bold genius and reckless luck.
So the takeaway is, don't be too hard on yourself when things go wrong, and don't be too arrogant when things go right.
Exactly. Judge with caution. As the saying goes, nothing is as good or as bad as it seems.
Which leads us perfectly into the next trap, the inability to say enough.
The trap of the moving goalpost. This is, in my opinion, the hardest financial skill to master because there's no logical ceiling.
We have two examples here, and they're both tragic. Rajat Gupta and Bernie Madoff. Let's look at Gupta first.
Rajat Gupta's life was an absolute triumph. He was an orphan from Kolkata. He rises from nothing to become the CEO of McKinsey, the most prestigious consulting firm in the world.
Unbelievable success.
He was on the board of Goldman Sachs. By 2008, he was worth $100 million.
$100 million. I mean, let's be real. With $100 million, you can do anything. You can retire, you can buy islands, you can fund hospitals. He had won the game.
He had won. But here's the problem. He ran in circles with billionaires. He'd hang out with guys who owned the private jets, not just rented them. And compared to them, he felt poor. He wanted to be a billionaire.
He wanted the B.
He did. So in 2008, right during the height of the financial crisis, he learned that Warren Buffett was about to invest $5 billion into Goldman Sachs to save the bank. This was top secret board-level information.
So what did he do?
He hangs up the phone from the board meeting and immediately calls a hedge fund manager named Rajaratnam. He tips him off. He buys shares before the news breaks to make a quick profit.
Insider trading.
Plain and simple. And he got caught. He went to federal prison. He destroyed a pristine reputation. He lost everything. And for what?
That's the tragedy. He didn't risk his freedom because he was starving. He didn't steal a loaf of bread.
No, he risked what he had and needed for what he didn't have and didn't need. That is the definition of foolishness. But it happens because of social comparison.
It's the ladder that never ends.
It is. The baseball player making $500,000 a year feels broke next to Mike Trout making $36 million. Mike Trout feels broke next to a hedge fund manager making $340 million. And that hedge fund manager feels broke next to Warren Buffett.
There's always a bigger fish.
Always. If you play the comparison game, you will lose. The only way to win is to stop playing, to define enough.
Now, does enough mean settling? Does it mean mediocrity? Because I can hear some listeners thinking, well, I want to be ambitious.
No, it doesn't mean you stop trying. Enough means knowing when the risk of ruin outweighs the benefit of more. It means realizing that the extra dollar isn't worth a sleepless night or a prison sentence or losing your family. It's about having a finish line so you don't run until you collapse.
Okay, let's shift gears from the psychology to the mechanics. We need to talk about the most powerful force in finance, compounding. And the source uses an analogy here that I absolutely loved, the Ice Age.
This blew my mind. We all know what an ice age is, massive sheets of ice covering the continents. But for a long time, scientists couldn't figure out why they happened. The assumption was that the Earth must have had these insanely cold winters.
Makes sense. Big ice requires big cold.
But the data didn't back it up. It turns out ice ages aren't caused by cold winters. They are caused by cool summers.
Wait, walk me through that. Cool summers.
Yes. So imagine a normal winter. Snow falls. But then the summer is just a little bit mild. It's not quite hot enough to melt all the snow from the previous winter. So a thin layer of ice stays on the ground.
Okay, so you have a patch of leftover ice.
Right. Now that patch of ice is white. It reflects the sun's rays, which cools the earth just a tiny bit more, which means next winter, even more snow sticks, and next summer, even less melts.
It's a feedback loop.
Exactly. Year after year. You don't need a catastrophe. You don't need a blizzard every day. You just need a tiny bit of snow to stick and compound. Over thousands of years, that tiny leftover layer grows into a continental ice sheet that buries North America.
Big results come from small changes compounding over time.
Precisely. And this is Warren Buffett's secret. We obsess over his stock picks. We analyze his trades. We think he's a genius at picking winners.
And he is, to be fair.
He is, but that's not the secret sauce. The real secret is simply time. Buffett has been investing since he was a child.
Let's look at the numbers, because they are hard to believe.
Buffett's net worth is roughly $84.5 billion. But do you know how much of that accumulated after his 65th birthday?
I'm guessing a significant chunk.
$81.5 billion.
Whoa. Repeat that.
$81.5 billion of his $84.5 billion came after he qualified for Social Security. Practically all of it.
That is insane. It's almost all at the end.
It's the hockey stick graph. If Buffett had been a normal guy, let's say he started investing at 30 with $25,000, and he still achieved his amazing 22% annual returns, but he retired at 60 to play golf and fish. Do you know what his net worth would be?
I'm scared to ask.
It would be about $11.9 million. So
You'd be a comfortable rich guy in Omaha, but nobody would know his name. We wouldn't be doing a deep dive about him.
exactly, he would be 99.9% less wealthy than he is today. His skill is investing, but his secret is time. Our brains are linear. We see 8 plus 8 plus 8. We can't handle exponential math like 8 by 8 by 8. It explodes in a way we can't visualize.
So the takeaway isn't to try to get the highest returns every single year. It's to just stay in the game.
Shut up and wait. That's the most powerful investment advice. Let the ice age happen.
But, and this is the big but, to let it happen, you have to survive. You have to be left standing. Which brings us to the crucial distinction between getting wealthy and staying wealthy.
Two completely different skills. Getting wealthy requires optimism. You have to take risks. You have to swing for the fences. You have to believe the future will be better.
But staying wealthy.
Staying wealthy requires paranoia. It requires a fear that what you've made can be taken away. It requires humility.
We have another tale of two investors here, this time from the Roaring '20s, Jesse Livermore and Abraham Jermansky.
These are great characters. Jesse Livermore was a trading legend. He is arguably the greatest trader who ever lived. In 1929, when the stock market crashed and triggered the Great Depression, Livermore didn't lose money.
He bet against it.
He shorted the market. He bet it would go down.
So while everyone else was jumping out of windows on Wall Street, he was making a fortune.
He made $3 billion in one day, adjusted for inflation. He came home to his wife, who was crying because she thought they were ruined like everyone else, and he said, "No, darling, we are fabulously rich." It was his best day ever.
Meanwhile, Abraham
Jermansky was a wealthy real estate developer, a big player. But he bet long on the market. He bet it would go up. When the crash hit, he lost everything. He was wiped out. He eventually committed suicide.
So Jermansky failed the survival test immediately.
But here's the twist. Livermore, the winner, the genius, felt invincible after that big win. He thought he couldn't lose. He became overconfident. He started making bigger and bigger bets with more and more leverage.
He lost his fear.
He lost his paranoia. 4 years later, Livermore had lost it all. He was broke. And tragically, he also took his own life.
So in the end, the winner and the loser ended up in the same tragic place.
Because neither of them understood survival. Getting money is offense. Keeping money is defense. You have to plan for the plan not going according to plan.
That is a bit of a tongue twister. Planning for the plan not going according to plan, this is what we call a margin of safety.
Exactly. It's leaving room for error. If you need 8% returns every single year to pay your bills and the market drops, you're dead. You have no margin of error. You need to structure your life so that you can endure the bad times.
Right.
Because if you get wiped out, the compounding stops. The snowball melts.
You have to be financially unbreakable.
That's the goal. Not just rich, but unbreakable. You want to be able to stick around long enough for the luck to find you.
Now, speaking of luck finding you, there is a fascinating section here about how often you actually need to be right to be successful. And I think this will relieve a lot of pressure for our listeners. Because the answer is not that often.
This is the tails you win concept. We tend to think that great investors make good decisions 100% of the time. We think they have a crystal ball. But the data shows that wealth is driven by the tails, the extreme outliers.
The source uses the example of a famous art collector.
Heinz Berggruen. He was legendary. He had this massive collection of Picassos, Clees, Matisses. People thought he had this magic eye for art, that he could spot a masterpiece from a mile away.
But when researchers actually looked at his ledger,
they found something funny. 99% of what he bought was relatively worthless. It didn't appreciate at all. He bought tons of junk.
So he was a wizard.
No, but the 1%, the few masterpieces he snagged, they went up in value so much that they paid for all the junk and then some. The tail events drove the entire portfolio. He could be wrong 99% of the time and still end up wildly successful.
We see this in business too. Look at Disney.
Disney is a classic example. In the mid-1930s, Walt Disney's studio was essentially broke. They had produced something like 400 cartoons. Most of them broke even or lost money. They were grinding.
And
Then they made Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
83 minutes of film.
83 minutes that changed everything. It made $8 million in 1938. That one movie paid off all the debts, bought the studio complex, and launched the empire. One tail event offset 400 failures.
We see this in the stock market data, too. I was shocked by the Russell 3000 stat in the notes.
It's humbling. If you look at the Russell 3000, which is a broad index of U.S. companies over a long period, 40% of those companies effectively failed. They lost 70% or more of their value.
So almost half of the market is a dud.
But the index still went up. Why? Because 7% of the companies performed so incredibly well. We're talking Amazon, Apple, Google, that they carried the entire index.
Even within Amazon, it's the same story.
Right. Amazon had the Fire Phone. Remember that?
I try not to.
It was a disaster, a total flop. But Amazon Web Services, AWS, and Prime were the tails. They paid for every Fire Phone disaster 1,000 times over.
So if you're an investor, you don't need to pick the winner every time. You just need to make sure you own the tails when they happen.
Exactly. As George Soros said, it's not whether you're right or wrong that's important, but how much money you make when you're right and how much you lose when you're wrong. You can be wrong half the time and still make a fortune.
That really takes the pressure off perfection.
Yeah.
You don't have to be a robot.
No. Which leads to this idea of why we are doing this in the first place. What is the money for?
Freedom.
Freedom. The highest dividend money pays is the ability to do what you want, when you want, with who you want.
There was a psychologist, Angus Campbell, who studied happiness. And I feel like we always hear the cliche, money doesn't buy happiness.
It's more nuanced than that. Campbell studied this for decades. He found that the strongest predictor of well-being wasn't your income or how big your house was or your job title. It was having a strong sense of controlling one's life.
Autonomy.
Autonomy. Money buys the ability to take a sick day without stressing about rent. It buys the ability to quit a toxic job and wait for a better one. It buys the ability to retire early if you need to care for a sick parent.
It's the unseen return of flexibility.
Exactly. And that flexibility is worth way more than a luxury car. But we get distracted by the visible stuff, the shiny objects. Which brings us to the man in the car paradox.
I love this one because we've all done this. I know I have.
Housel talks about his time working as a valet. He'd see these guys pull up in Ferraris or Rolls Royces. And he realized something profound. When he saw the car, he didn't look at the driver and think, wow, that guy's cool.
He looked at the car and thought, I would look cool in that car.
Precisely. You ignore the driver. You insert yourself into the fantasy. The paradox is that the driver bought the car to get respect and admiration. He wants people to look at him. But nobody cares about him. They only care about the object.
It's brutal but true. Housel has that great quote, humility, kindness, and empathy will bring you more respect than horsepower ever will.
But it's a hard lesson because the car is a visible signal of success. Which brings us to one of the most important definitions in the whole deep dive. The difference between being rich and being wealthy.
I always use those words interchangeably. I thought they meant the same thing.
Most people do. But Housel makes a sharp distinction. Rich is current income. It's visible. It's a $100,000 car, the designer clothes, the Instagram vacation. If you spend money, people see it. You look rich.
But wealth.
Wealth is what you don't see. Wealth is income not spent. It's the money in the 401k compounding quietly. It's the unexercised stock options. It's the savings account. Wealth is the option to buy something later.
The source uses a diet analogy that really clicked for me.
Right. Exercise is visible. You see someone running in the park sweating. You know they are working out. But wealth in this analogy is refusing the cake after the workout. It's the restraint. It's invisible. You don't see someone not eating a donut.
And because we can't see wealth, it's really hard to imitate. We see the rich people spending, so we think, oh, to be successful, I need to spend. We can't see the wealthy people saving, so we don't learn the lesson.
It's why we have so many people chasing rich, the appearance, and sacrificing wealth, the freedom. Rihanna's lawyer famously said to her after she nearly went broke, was it really necessary to tell her that if you spend money on things, you will end up with the things and not the money?
Ouch. Simple math, but easy to forget when you're caught up in the lifestyle. So if we are trying to build this invisible wealth, do we need to be perfectly rational robots? Do we need to optimize every penny?
No, and this is the reasonable rational argument. We are emotional creatures. We shouldn't aim for the mathematically optimal strategy if it makes us miserable. We should aim for the strategy that is reasonable, the one that lets us sleep at night.
The story of the syphilis cure is wild here. I have to warn the listeners, this is a bit graphic.
It is, but it makes the point perfectly. Julius Wagner Jahreg. In the early 1900s, he figured out a cure for syphilis. At the time, syphilis was a death sentence.
So what was the cure?
He started injecting patients with malaria.
Malaria.
Yeah.
You're kidding me.
No, because malaria causes extremely high fevers. And he realized that the syphilis bacteria could not survive high heat. The fever would kill the infection. Then he'd treat the malaria with quinine, which was available.
So it worked.
It worked. He won a Nobel Prize for it. It was rational. It saved lives.
It involved giving people malaria. That sounds horrible.
It was miserable, terrifying, fevers, shaking, hallucinations. So eventually, when we found penicillin, we stopped doing it. Penicillin does the same job, but without the fever. Even if the fever was arguably a more natural biological defense, we chose the reasonable path comfort over the purely rational biological path of suffering to heal.
So how does this apply to my portfolio? I'd prefer not to have financial malaria.
Think about the home bias. People love investing in companies from their own country. If you live in the U.S., you buy U.S. stocks. If you live in Australia, you buy Australian stocks. Mathematically, it's not optimal. A perfectly rational robot would diversify globally to minimize risks.
But I feel safer investing in companies I know. I know Coca-Cola, I know Ford.
Exactly. And here's the kicker. If owning stocks you know and love keeps you from panicking and selling everything when the market crashes, then it's a good strategy, even if the math says it's imperfect.
Because the best strategy isn't the one on the spreadsheet. It's the one you can actually stick to.
Precisely. If paying off your mortgage gives you peace of mind, do it. Even if the interest rate is low and the math says you should invest that money, being reasonable keeps you in the game. Being perfectly rational might get you kicked out because you can't handle the volatility emotionally.
Finally, let's talk about the future. Because we love to predict it. We love to look at history and say, okay, this happened before, so it will happen again.
The historians as prophets fallacy. We use history as a map, but history is really just the study of things that happened. It doesn't tell us what will happen. Housel makes the point that the world is driven by outliers, by surprises. Things that have never happened before happen all the time.
The outline mentions the chain reaction starting from 9/11, and when you trace it, it's unbelievable.
It shows how impossible prediction is, so let's trace it. 9/11 happens, a terrorist attack, the world is in shock. To stabilize the U.S. economy, the Federal Reserve cuts interest rates dramatically.
Cheap money to keep the system flowing.
Right. That cheap money helps fuel a massive housing bubble. Everyone starts buying houses because credit is easy. That bubble bursts, causing the 2008 financial crisis.
Which collapses the job market.
So, millions of young people can't find jobs. What do? They go back to college to wait out the recession. They take out loans to pay for it.
And that leads directly to the student loan crisis of 2020.
Yep. So you have a direct line from 19 hijackers in 2001 to a student loan crisis nearly 20 years later.
And you could never, ever predict that. If you sat down in 2000 and tried to forecast the next 20 years, you wouldn't get a single link in that chain correct.
Not one. We prepare for the worst event we have seen, but the crash that kills you is usually the one you've never seen before.
Like Fukushima.
Right. That nuclear plant was built to withstand the worst earthquake in history. They looked at the data, they were rational, but the tsunami that hit was unprecedented. It was bigger than history.
So if we can't predict the future, and we know surprises are coming,
Yeah.
what do we do? How do we plan?
You save for no specific reason.
That goes against everything we're taught. We're taught to save for a house, for a car, for retirement.
Those are specific risks. You need to save for the unknown, for the inevitable surprise, for the car repair you didn't see coming, or the medical bill, or the sudden job loss.
Or the global pandemic.
Or the global pandemic. Housel puts it beautifully. Savings are the gap between your ego and your income.
Savings are the gap between your ego and your income. I love that.
It brings it all back to behavior. It's not about how much you make, it's about how much you keep and how much control you have. It's about acknowledging that you don't know what's coming, so you need a buffer, a margin of safety.
So to wrap this up, we've covered a lot. We've looked at the janitor and the executive. We've explored the power of compounding and the fact that you don't need to be bright all the time.
And ultimately, it all comes down to defining what game you are playing. Are you chasing rich, the visible stuff that impresses strangers at a stoplight? Or are you chasing wealth, the invisible freedom to control your time?
That is the question we leave you with today. Are you driving the Ferrari for the stranger on the sidewalk? Or are you building the freedom to go where you want?
Choose wisely.
Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.